Hello and welcome to People in Profit. I'm Pellegrin. This week, we'll talk about one of the countries that's ended on Donald Trump's bad side. Brazil, under the leadership of President Lula da Silva, is now the target of tariffs of up to 50% on most of its goods heading to the United States. All because of how it has treated Trump's alter ego in Brasilia, Jair Bolsonaro. The former president's been convicted by the Supreme Court of orchestrating a coup and now faces 27 years in prison. Well, those economic sanctions are changing the calculus for Brazilian business. If they can't count on the U.S. market, then who should they turn to? The first answer there is also Brazil's first trade partner, China. Well, Donald Trump, though, is under the impression that won't be enough. Take a listen.
I'm very sorry to say this, that Brazil is doing poorly and will continue to do poorly. They can only do well when they're working with us. Without us, they will fail, just as others have failed. It's true.
Well, for more on this, we'll speak with Tulio Cariello, who is the Director of Research at the Brazil-China Business Council. Thank you for talking to us on People in Profit.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, before we get to the ties between Brazil and China, I want to talk about the U.S., Brazil's historic partner in a way. The U.S. has had a long-running trade surplus with Brazil. And how would you define that relationship between the two countries, especially in light of that Trump soundbite we just heard?
Well, Brazil trade relations with the United States have a very important story for us. Because for many years, the U.S. was our main trading partner until China overtook the U.S. about 15 years ago. And now the U.S. is our second most important partner. So Brazil exports a wide range of products to the U.S., including many higher value-added goods like machinery, airplanes, and steel, as well as some agricultural products. On the other hand, as you mentioned, we've had a long-standing trade deficit with the United States, which has added up to around $40 billion over the past 10 years. And with China, by comparison, we've actually accumulated a trade surplus of almost $280 billion in the same period. So it's quite a different scenario comparing both countries.
And how would you describe the reaction from Brazil's business community to those U.S. tariffs? A business community that tends to be more conservative and right-wing.
Yeah. Overall, I believe the reaction has been very negative, actually, because we're talking about business. So many companies in Brazil have complained and really struggled with these tariffs. They've affected sectors ranging from agribusiness, like beef and coffee especially, to the chemical industry, pulp and paper, and even the aerospace sector like planes, because we know that some Brazilian companies like Embraer has a very important market in the US. So there are reports of companies that had to fire workers, cut back, or even suspend production because of the tariffs. So I'd say it caused a major shift in the way some Brazilian companies view the Trump administration, not the US per se, but with the Trump administration, I believe it's a very different scenario comparing to other administrations.
So let's zero in on one industry in particular that holds a huge amount of importance in Brazil, and that's coffee. It's the world's biggest producer and exporter of the grain, with huge amounts destined for the U.S. market. That market is now in jeopardy. Our correspondents in Brazil sent us this report.
Surrounded by mountains with green lines stretching as far as the eye can see, we're in the coffee valley in the northwest of Rio de Janeiro state. Small plantations like José Natal da Silva's farm are part of Brazil's family farming system that produces 2/3 of the country's coffee.
This flower will become a coffee bean.
For years, José's been dealing with the adverse effects of climate change. This trade and diplomatic war with the US is the last thing he needs.
The price suddenly dropped. We were really scared. Everything stopped here. It was chaos. You can't imagine. Most producers weren't sleeping anymore. Either we let the coffee rot here or we sell it at a loss. We had to lay off lots of farm workers.
Hundreds of miles away, Latin America's largest port seems unaffected by the crisis. 75% of Brazil's coffee exports are shipped from here in these containers.
These are the containers that come in and out every day so that our coffee reaches our main buyers.
Since Trump announced the tariffs, several thousand containers have been stuck at port. But this exporter isn't worried, as he's convinced this tariff war will strengthen other promising markets, such as China.
It is a country with great potential and growing coffee consumption, but it is a developing market that we still need to work on. But just as Brazil will find it difficult in the short term to find a market for its 8 million bags of coffee, the US will have a hard time finding a supplier. Both countries must try to find a diplomatic solution.
Coffee exports to China increased by 20% last year, a first inroad into the new BRICS market. Brazil is president of the economic bloc this year and has already said that it won't allow the US to dictate its behavior any longer.
So as we saw in that report, Tulio, Brazilian businesses are looking to the Chinese market to make up for the losses in the US market. Can it actually fill that gap for the Brazilian economy?
Well, actually, there isn't much room for China to fully step and fill that gap because Brazil's trade relationship with the US and with China is quite different. With China, Brazil mainly exports commodities like soybean, iron ore, and oil, while with the US, the exports are much more complex and diversified. But yes, some specific sectors may find some opportunities in China. For example, coffee, as we mentioned here, there is a promising market for coffee in China. By the way, China is actually the third market for Brazilian coffee in Asia. Japan is first and Korea is second place. So I believe there is a promising market, as I mentioned, and right after Trump's tariff were announced, the Chinese government actually authorized more Brazilian coffee exporters, which shows an important kind of synergy between the two countries. The meat sector, more broadly, can also look to expand in China, which is already Brazilians' main customer in the world. So I'd say that overall, there is no real scenario where the Chinese market could fully replace the American market. So there are some differences, but there are also some opportunities to expand our sales to China.
And what about going the other way, looking at Chinese firms looking to access the Brazilian market right now? Is there actually a push on the part of Brazilian industry groups to grant them better access in light of that trade war with the U.S.?
Yeah, in general, yeah, and I'd say that investments is a key area when we talk about that. Last year, Chinese investments in Brazil actually doubled compared to the year before, reaching for about $4 billion in 2024 alone. So we saw Chinese investments in a wide range of sectors as well, especially in electricity, including hydropower, solar, wind, oil extraction, and a lot of investments in manufacturing as well, which is now one of the main sectors attracting Chinese capital in Brazil. Mining has also been a key area, and I believe we will see even more projects in the coming years, especially minerals that are strategic for China, such as copper, lithium, tin, and so on. So especially when I talk about this dispute between the US and China concerning strategic minerals, Brazil is for sure a key partner for both countries, and both countries will be interested in investing here. And the fact is, China has already invested almost $80 billion in Brazil in the last 15 years, and everything suggests that they will keep interested in the country for the coming years.
And there's another aspect to Brasilia's work in this regard in terms of trade, and it's via BRICS, the BRICS alliance. And that aspect is reducing reliance on the US dollar. In concrete terms, can you tell us what that means, actually?
Well, Brazil and China have been working on mechanisms to make it easier to trade in their own currencies and reduce the dependency on the dollar. And the use of the renminbi's international trade is already a reality in many countries. But even though Brazil now holds more reserves in renminbi than it did a few years ago, our foreign trade is still very dependent on the US dollar, not only with China, but in general terms. So the dollar remains a strong and traditional currency that is accepted pretty much everywhere. But I think it's important for Brazil to look for ways to reduce this dependence, especially now that the relationship with the US is deteriorating fast. And the government has been moving in that direction, I believe, to see other ways to depend less on the US dollar. But we also know that in the end of the day, it's up to the companies to decide which currency they want to use. And what I see there is that the dollar is still by far the preferred currency. So in general, I believe we see that the dollar still is the main currency, but there are opportunities to expand our trade with China in renminbi.
Tulio Cariello, you're the Director of Research at the Brazil-China Business Council. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Well, that's all for this week. As usual, you can catch all of our previous episodes by looking at the People and Profit page on the France 24 app or on the podcast platform of your choice. In the meantime, obrigado e até breve.